SingleDad was having tea alone until triplet girls whispered, "Pretend you're our father." The tea had gone cold long before Daniel Carter noticed. Steam no longer curled from the cup. The surface was still, untouched, just like the life he'd been living for years. Daniel sat at the same small corner table he always chose, near the window of a quiet cafe tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop in downtown Boston. Sunday afternoons were slow here. Most people came in pairs. Some came as families. Some laughed too loud. Some held hands, like they were afraid to let go. Daniel came alone. He always did. He watched people pass by outside. A father lifting his son onto his shoulders, a couple arguing softly, an elderly woman walking her dog like it was the only thing keeping her steady. Daniel wrapped both hands around the mug, not to drink it, but because it was warm. Warmth was something he rarely felt anymore. 42 years old, a successful architect, a man everyone described as calm, polite, and strong. What they didn't say was empty. He had once imagined Sundays very differently. Loud breakfasts, sticky tables, a child tugging at his sleeve asking 1,000 questions before noon. Emily used to tease him about it, said he'd be the kind of dad who cried at school plays. Emily. The name still hurt, even after all these years. Daniel blinked and stared harder out the window, as if he could erase the memory by force. That's when a small shadow fell across the table. Excuse me, sir?" The voice was soft, careful, the kind of voice that had learned not to ask for too much. Daniel looked up, and for a moment his brain refused to make sense of what he was seeing. 3 little girls stood there, not just similar, identical. Same chestnut hair pulled into slightly messy ponytails, same round faces, same wide brown eyes filled with uncertainty. They wore simple dresses, clean but clearly second-hand, and each of them clutched their hands together like they were holding themselves in place. Triplets. Daniel straightened in his chair. Yes? The girls exchanged glances like they were silently voting on something important. Then the smallest one stepped forward. She leaned close, standing on her tippy toes, and whispered something that made Daniel's heart stumble. "Pretend you're our father, please?"
Daniel didn't answer right away. He just stared at her, trying to understand if he'd heard correctly. "Pretend?" he repeated quietly. The girl nodded fast, too fast. Her sisters moved closer, forming a small wall between Daniel and the rest of the cafe, as if they were afraid someone might overhear. The tallest girl swallowed. "Just for a little bit." The middle one added, "We won't bother you much." Daniel's eyes drifted past them. At a table near the counter, a man and a woman sat stiffly. Their voices were low but sharp, cutting through the soft cafe music. They weren't whispering kindly, they were arguing, the kind of argument that had been happening for a long time. Not once did either of them look toward the girls. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. "Girls," he said gently, lowering his voice, "where are your parents?" The smallest girl shrugged. "They're with us." "That's them?" Daniel asked, nodding toward the arguing couple. All 3 girls shook their heads. "No," the middle one said quickly. "They just watch us." Daniel hesitated. Every sensible thought told him this wasn't his place. He didn't know these children. He didn't know the situation. Getting involved could complicate things. But then, the smallest girl reached out and lightly touched his sleeve. Her hand was trembling. "Please," she whispered again, "they don't like us talking to strangers." Daniel pulled out the chair beside him. "All right, just for a minute." The relief on their faces was instant, like someone had opened a window in a room they'd been suffocating in. They climbed onto the chairs around him, careful and quiet, as if he might change his mind. "I'm Lily," said the tallest one. "I'm Rose," said the middle. "I'm Ivy," said the smallest, smiling for the first time. Daniel nodded. "I'm Daniel." Ivy tilted her head. No, for now, your dad. The word landed heavy in his chest. Before he could stop himself, Daniel smiled. The arguing at the other table grew louder. Not loud enough to draw attention, but loud enough for fear to travel. Daniel noticed Lily stiffen first. Her back went straight, her jaw tight. Rose lowered her eyes. Ivy slid closer to Daniel's arm, her small fingers curling into the sleeve of his coat like it was a lifeline. Daniel followed their gaze. The woman at the table slammed her hand down. I told you this isn't working. The man leaned back, rubbing his temples. Keep your voice down. Ivy flinched. Daniel felt it instantly, something sharp, protective, and unfamiliar waking up inside him. How long have you been with them? Daniel asked gently. A few weeks. Do they yell a lot? He asked. Mostly when they think we're not listening. Daniel exhaled slowly. He hadn't planned to say anything, hadn't planned to step in, but some part of him, the part that had once dreamed of sticky tables and bedtime stories, was already standing up inside his chest. That's when the woman noticed. Her eyes snapped toward Daniel. Hey, she said sharply, what do you think you're doing? The cafe seemed to pause. Daniel stayed seated, calm but firm. They came over to say hello. They're not supposed to talk to strangers, the woman snapped, standing up. Lily slid off her chair. She's not our mom, Lily said. The words landed like glass shattering. The woman froze. What did you say? Daniel's heart began to pound. The man stood too quickly, his chair scraping loudly. Lily, stop. She's not our mom, Lily repeated, louder this time, and he's not our dad. Ivy's grip tightened. But he is, Ivy whispered, looking up at Daniel. Then, louder, clearer, braver, he's our dad. The entire cafe went quiet. Every head turned. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The woman laughed, sharp and uncomfortable. That's ridiculous. Rose finally looked up. Her voice shook, but she spoke anyway. We asked him to pretend because we're scared. Daniel stood, slowly, carefully. I think, he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him, we should all take a breath. The cafe manager approached, concern etched across her face. Is everything all right? No, Lily said, it's not. The word dad echoed again in Daniel's mind, and suddenly pretending didn't feel like pretending at all. The police arrived quietly, but their presence changed everything. The girls sat huddled together on one side of the cafe booth. Daniel sat beside them, not touching, but close enough that they knew he wasn't going anywhere. Across from them, the woman crossed her arms, defensive. The man stared at the floor. A female officer knelt in front of the girls. Can you tell me what's going on? Lily glanced at Daniel. He nodded. It's okay. They're not mean all the time, Rose said softly, but they fight, and they don't want us. The officer's expression softened. Who takes care of you? They do, Ivy said, but only because they have to. The officer turned to the adults. What's your relationship to these children? The man cleared his throat. Second cousins, temporary guardians. Daniel felt his jaw tighten. The officer nodded slowly. Where is their mother? Silence. The woman looked away. Finally, the man muttered, Gone. Gone where? The officer asked. We don't know. The cafe manager whispered to another employee who had already called child services. Daniel's heart sank. He knew what that meant. Foster care, separation, uncertainty. Ivy suddenly stood up and wrapped her arms around Daniel's waist. Dad, she cried, tears spilling freely now. Please don't let them take us. Rose and Lily followed. 3 small bodies pressed into him. Daniel froze for half a second. Then he bent down and held them, tight, protective, real. The officer watched quietly.
Child services arrived shortly after, a woman with kind eyes and a clipboard held like a shield. "We're going to make sure everyone's safe," she said gently. Lily sobbed. "That means we're going away." Daniel looked up. "Is there any other option?" The caseworker studied him. "And you are—" Daniel swallowed. "I'm the man they asked to pretend, and I don't want to stop." That night, Daniel didn't go home. He sat in his car outside his apartment building for nearly 2 hours, hands resting uselessly on the steering wheel. The girls' cries replayed in his head. "Dad, don't let them take us!" He hadn't been called Dad in his life. Not once. And now it felt impossible to imagine not being it. Inside his apartment, everything felt wrong, too quiet, too empty. No shoes by the door, no voices, no mess. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed and buried his face in his hands. What was he doing? He had no children, no experience, no guarantee this wouldn't end in heartbreak. Again. He had already lost a family once. Could he survive losing another? But then he remembered Ivy's arms around him, Rose's trembling honesty, Lily's fierce bravery. They hadn't asked for perfection. They had asked for safety. By morning, Daniel had made a decision. He called a lawyer. "I don't know what this will take," Daniel said quietly, "but I want to help those girls." The lawyer paused. "Are you sure?" Daniel looked at the empty mug on his nightstand, the same tea he'd been drinking alone for years. "I've never been more sure of anything." The first supervised visit took place in a small beige room that smelled like disinfectant and old paper. Daniel arrived 20 minutes early. He sat on a plastic chair with his hands folded in his lap, staring at a wall covered in posters about safe families and healthy attachments. The words felt clinical, nothing like the ache in his chest. A social worker named Miss Alvarez stood nearby, clipboard tucked under her arm. "You understand the rules?" she asked kindly. Daniel nodded. "I do. No unsupervised contact. No promises, no physical affection unless initiated by the children." He agreed to all of it, because seeing them at all was enough. The door opened, and suddenly the room was full of life. "Dad!" Ivy ran first. She stopped herself just inches away from him, hands clenched, eyes searching his face for permission. Daniel crouched down. "Hi," he whispered. She hugged him anyway. Rose followed, slower, careful, like she was afraid joy might be taken away if she reached too fast. Lily walked in last. She didn't run. She studied him for a long second, then nodded as if confirming something only she could see. "You came," she said. Daniel's throat tightened. "I promised." They spent the hour coloring, talking about school, laughing when Daniel accidentally spilled crayons all over the floor. When time was up, Ivy asked the question they were all thinking. "Will you come back?" Daniel looked at Miss Alvarez, then back at the girls. "Yes," he said, "every chance they let me." At the group home, the girls began waiting for him. Miss Alvarez noticed it first. Every visit day, 3 small faces would press against the front window long before Daniel arrived. Even when he was late, stuck in traffic, heart racing, they waited. Rose counted cars. Ivy waved at strangers. Lily stood still, watching the road like she could will him into existence. The day Daniel arrived in the rain, soaked and breathless, Lily didn't smile. She just opened the door and said, "I knew you'd come." Daniel didn't magically know what to do. He messed up. He brought the wrong snacks, forgot one of their teachers' names, mixed up which girl liked strawberry and which hated it. But he learned. He kept a notebook in his car. Lily likes facts, hates being talked over. Rose, sensitive, needs reassurance. Ivy, fearless, but cries at night. He learned to listen more than he spoke. to kneel instead of towering, to apologize when he got it wrong. One visit, Rose asked quietly, "Do you get tired of us?" Daniel answered without hesitation, "No, I get scared of losing you." She nodded, like that made sense. The paperwork was endless. Forms, background checks, financial reviews. Daniel passed every one. Still, nothing was guaranteed. One afternoon, Miss Alvarez sat across from him, expression careful. "There's a possibility of extended foster placement," she said. "Nothing permanent yet." Daniel clenched his jaw. "Why?" "The system moves slowly," she said gently, "and we have to be certain." That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He replayed every moment, every mistake, every laugh. What if loving them wasn't enough? During one visit, Ivy handed Daniel a folded piece of paper. "I made you something." It was a drawing. 4 stick figures, 3 small ones, 1 tall one. Above them, written in uneven letters, "Daniel." Daniel swallowed hard. Lily watched his face closely. "You don't have to keep us," she said. "We just wanted you to know." Daniel folded the paper carefully and placed it in his wallet. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time, he meant it without fear. The courthouse didn't look like a place where families were made. It was gray, cold, quiet in the wrong way. Daniel stood in the hallway outside the courtroom, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. He wore the same navy suit he used for client meetings, but today it felt heavier, like it carried more than fabric. Across the room, Lily, Rose, and Ivy sat beside Ms. Alvarez on a wooden bench. They were dressed neatly, matching sweaters, clean shoes, trying very hard to look like children who belonged somewhere. Ivy kept swinging her feet. Rose stared at the floor. Lily watched the courtroom doors like she was guarding them. Daniel walked over. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Lily nodded. "Are you?" Daniel didn't lie. "I'm nervous." Rose reached out and slipped her hand into his. "So are we." The bailiff opened the door. "Court is now in session." The judge was older, with kind eyes and a voice that didn't rush. He reviewed files, asked questions, listened. Daniel answered everything honestly. "Yes, I live alone. Yes, my wife passed away. No, I never planned on having children this way." The judge looked up. "But?" Daniel took a breath. "But they planned on me." The courtroom was silent. The social worker spoke next, described the visits, the consistency, the attachment. "They don't ask if he's coming anymore. They ask what time." The judge nodded slowly. Then the door at the back opened, and everything changed. She looked thinner than her photos, tired, pale, strong in a quiet, broken way. The girls froze. "Mom?" Ivy whispered. The woman stopped a few feet away, tears already streaming. "Hi, my babies." Daniel stood instinctively, but stayed back. This wasn't his moment. The judge allowed her to speak. Her voice shook. "I didn't leave them because I didn't love them. I left because I thought I was hurting them." She spoke of depression, of hospital rooms, of nights she couldn't get out of bed, let alone be a mother to 3 children. "I thought they deserved better than me," she said, eyes fixed on the floor. "I still do." She turned to Daniel. "I watched from a distance," she admitted. "I saw how they look at you." Daniel's chest tightened. "They're safe with you. They're loved." She swallowed hard. "I won't take that from them." That night, Daniel sat alone in his apartment again. The drawing still lived in his wallet, but fear crept in. What if loving them wasn't enough? What if they needed their mother more than him? What if he was standing in the way of something bigger? He almost called Ms. Alvarez, almost said the words that would let him step aside. Instead, his phone rang. It was Lily. Ms. Alvarez had allowed one call. "Dad?" Lily asked. "Yes? Are we going to be okay?" Daniel closed his eyes. "Yes," he said firmly. "We are." The final hearing lasted less than 30 minutes. The judge leaned forward. These children need stability, and they have found it. He looked at the girls. "Do you understand what guardianship means?" Rose nodded. "It means we stay together." Ivy added, "And with you." Lily looked straight at Daniel. "It means we choose you." The judge smiled softly. "Guardianship is granted." Daniel didn't move. Then Ivy launched herself into his arms. Rose followed. Lily held on last, tight, unbreakable. Daniel's shoulders shook. For the first time in years, he cried in front of other people, and he didn't care.